under burning rain and screaming vox ghosts. They arrive already dying. Flames walk where boots should be. Ash breathes, and the dead remember how to fight. Chapter 1, Born of Fire, Unbound by Death. They do not descend. They manifest. One moment. The battlefield is chaos. Bolter fire. Prayers screamed into the wind. Men breaking beneath the weight of the impossible. The next, the air ignites. Warp flame coils the reality like an open wound, and from that wound they step forward, slow and inevitable, as if the universe itself has made room for them. The Legion of the Damned has arrived. No banners, Eno Vox dash hails the Eno heraldry beyond fire and bone. Their armor is blackened ceramite, cracked and scorched as if it has burned 1,000 times and refused to turn to ash. Flames crawl across their forms, not consuming, not spreading, clinging, as though the fire itself knows their names. Skulls leer from their helms, eyelenses glowing with a dull, hellish light. Chains hang useless and melted. Purity seals are burned into illegibility, reduced to cinders that still refuse to fall. They do not run. They advance. Each step is heavy, deliberate, final. Bolter shells pass through them and detonate behind. Lost fire flickers and dies against ghostly armor. Even blades that strike true bite into nothing but embers and pain. The Legion does not bleed. It burns. To witness them is to feel something ancient recoil. Not fear, recognition. Because the Legion of the Damned is not a chapter in the way others are. They have no homeworld, no recruitment, no known gene seed vaults, no chapter master issuing commands from a throne of iron and scripture. They are what remains. Imperial records try to name them, try to catalog, try to rationalize. They fail. Some call them a cursed successor chapter, lost in the warp and reborn as revenants. Others whisper they are warp echoes, souls of Astartes bound together by unresolved odes, manifesting only when Imperium stands on the brink of annihilation. There are even those who dare claim the Legion is not alive at all, but a weapon shaped from the Emperor's own dying will, unleashed only when hope has already failed. All theories share one truth. The Legion does not arrive early. They come when the war is already lost, when defenses have collapsed, when command structures are broken, when prayers are gone unanswered long enough to rot. Only then do the flames appear. And when they do, the tide turns, not through strategy, not through reinforcement, but through extinction. The Legion fights without coordination as other chapters understand it. There are no shouted orders, no visible command hierarchy. Yet they move with impossible unity, as if guided by a single distant hunger. Targets are chosen with brutal precision. Enemy champions fall first. Sorcerers burn screaming, as warp fire devours warp fire. Demons recoil not in pain, but in denial. The Legion of the Damned should not be here. Reality knows it. The warp knows it. And still they fight. Bolters bark with ghostlight. Each round burns with unnatural flame, detonating not just flesh but soul. Enemies struck by their fire do not simply die. They are unmade, reduced to drifting ash in memory. Even the battlefield remembers them only briefly before the wind scatters what little remains. And always the Legion advances. There is no mercy in them. No hesitation, no rage. Only duty frozen, eternal and absolute. Imperial guardsmen who survive such battles speak in fragments afterward. They talk about voices inside their heads. Not words, not commands, but pressure, a weight, like standing too close to a funeral pyre that remembers your name. Some swear they recognize the Legion's heraldry beneath the flames. Old chapter markings, destroyed chapters, dead chapters, chapters that no longer exist. That is where the fear truly begins. Because if the Legion of the Damned is formed from the lost, the erased, The forgotten, then what they represent is not salvation. It is judgment. The Imperium does not call them. There is no astropathic signal that summons warp ghosts clad in fire. No ritual. No authority. They come because something has crossed a line. A world that must not fall. A war that must not be lost. A moment where extinction would echo too far. They are not reinforcements. They are the last consequence. And when the battle ends, when the enemy is broken, when the war proceeds, when the survivors stagger among ruins and burning corpses, the Legion does not remain. They fade. Flames gutter. Armor cracks into nothing. And where they stood, there is only scorched ground and silence. No bodies, no gene dash seed, no proof. Only the memory of fire, walking like men. This is the first truth of the Legion of the Damned. They are not alive. They are not dead. They are bound. Bound to war. Bound to failure. Bound to moments when the Imperium has nothing left to give but ghosts. And the galaxy burns often enough that they are never truly gone. The flames are always waiting. And so is the silence after. Chapter 2. The chapter that should not exist. They have no beginning. Not one the Imperium can prove. Every Space Marine chapter is born in ink and blood. Founding writ sealed by the High Lords. Gene seed tied and tracked. Heraldry sanctified. A home world named. Even the most secretive chapters leave a shadow in the archives. The Legion of the Damned leaves nothing. Search the Libraria's vaults of Terra, and you will find contradictions, fragmented reports, entire pages burned out of data slates, as if reality itself rejected the words written there. In some records, the Legion is listed as a cursed successor of the Firehawks, a chapter lost during a warp translation in late M41. In others, that link is dismissed as coincidence. In still others, the Firehawks themselves are listed as destroyed long before the Legion ever appeared. Truth fractures around them. The Firehawks theory persists because it is comforting. It offers a shape to the horror, a cause, a beginning. The Firehawks vanished in the warp. Later, spectral Astartes clad in flame began appearing. Cause and effect. Neat. Safe. Wrong. Because the Legion's heraldry does not stay consistent. Beneath the flames, observers have reported glimpses of markings that do not belong to the Firehawks at all. Symbols of chapters declared extinct centuries earlier. Sigils that should not exist in the same place, in the same battle, on the same armor. The Legion does not wear one past. It wears many. That is where the scholars stop writing and start whispering. Because if the Legion of the Damned is not a chapter reborn, but a gathering, then the implications are far darker. It suggests that the warp has become a graveyard for loyal Astartes who died unrecorded, unremembered, or abandoned by history. That something within the Immaterium gathers these lost warriors, binds them together, and sends them back when the galaxy reaches moments of irreversible failure, not as individuals, as a legion that should have died 10,000 years ago. Their war gear supports this fear. The Legion's armor is ancient, too ancient, markings consistent with multiple eras of Astartes design coexist on the same battlefield. Old Mark III plates march beside warped Mark VII silhouettes, bolters of obsolete pattern fire alongside weapons that never existed in Mechanicus catalogs. Time does not apply to them cleanly, nor does death. They show no signs of supply lines, no Thunderhawks, no drop pods. They do not arrive from orbit in any conventional sense. They simply are, stepping out of fire, smoke, and warp-scarred air as a reality has momentarily forgotten its own rules. Attempts to track their gene seed have failed entirely. Apothecaries have never recovered a body, never extracted progenoids, never even confirmed that such organs still exist within them. Auspex readings fluctuate wildly when aimed at the Legion, showing life signs one moment and nothing the next. Some scanners record them as dead matter animated by warp energy. Others register them as fully living Astartes wrapped in impossible thermal anomalies. The truth is likely worse than either. They are bound spirits in ceramite, not demons. Demons flee them. The Legion's presence destabilizes the warp itself. In several documented engagements against Chaos forces, warp phenomena collapsed upon their arrival. Sorcerous rituals failed. Demonic manifestations flickered, screamed, and unraveled. This is not the behavior of creatures empowered by the warp. It is the behavior of something hated by it, which leads to the most dangerous theory of all, that the Legion of the Damned is not a warp-born accident, but a countermeasure, a fail-safe, something tied not to the warp, but to the Emperor himself. During the Great Crusade, the Emperor created weapons beyond comprehension. Not all of them were primarchs. Not all of them were armies. Some were concepts made real, contingencies designed to activate when certain thresholds were crossed. What if the Legion is one of those? Not summoned by prayer, but by necessity. Not bound to time, but to outcome. When a battle reaches a point where Imperial defeat would fracture something essential, faith, history, continuity, the Legion manifests. Not to save everyone, not to win cleanly, but to ensure the enemy does not. This will explain their behavior, their indifference to command structures, their refusal to remain after victory, their absence from celebrations, commendations, or records. They are not meant to integrate. They are meant to correct, and then vanish. The Adeptus Ministorum despises them. You cannot canonize fire that does not kneel. The Inquisition fears them. You cannot interrogate silence. Even the Adeptus Astartes regard them with unease, for the Legion does not fight like brothers. They fight like the dead who have remembered their duty. Those who fight beside them report an overwhelming sensation, not of hope, but of inevitability, a pressure that settles in the chest like frost, a certainty that the battle will end soon, one way or another. Guardsmen have been known to weep as the Legion advances, not from terror, but from relief, because something has finally arrived that cannot be broken. And yet, when the smoke clears, that relief curdles, because the Legion does not acknowledge gratitude. They do not salute. They do not speak. They do not stay. They fade back into flame, leaving allies alive, but changed. Witnesses carry scars without wounds, memories that refuse to settle. Some report dreams of burning battlefields they never fought on, of voices whispering oaths they do not recognize, of standing in fire and feeling no pain. Contact with the Legion leaves residue, not physical, spiritual. The Imperium pretends not to notice. It files reports, redacts them, seals them, labels encounters as unconfirmed Astartes assistance. It is easy that way, because to accept the Legion of the Damned as real is to accept this truth. The Imperium is so broken that even its dead must still fight, and they will, again and again, until the last war burns itself into silence. Fire drags itself across the ruins like a memory that refuses to fade. Chapter 3. Flames that walk the warp. They do not burn like ordinary fire. That is the first thing the Psychers notice, those who survive long enough to notice anything at all. Warp flame is alive. It screams. It writhes. It answers when called. The fire that clings to the Legion of the Damned does none of this. It does not lash outward. It does not consume fuel. It does not spread unless the Legion wills it to spread. It endures. Librarians who have stood within its presence describe a sensation unlike any other psychic phenomenon. Not the shriek of the warp, not the crushing pressure of demonic proximity, but a void, an absence where the warp should be reacting and does not. Like a wound cauterized so thoroughly that even pain has been denied. The Legion's flames do not belong to the Immaterium. They wound it. Where the Legion advances, the warp recoils. Psychic manifestations destabilize. Sorcery frays at the edges. Demons hesitate, not out of fear, but confusion. They recognize the fire as something hostile to their nature, something that does not obey the rules they were born into. This is why the Legion is most often reported during wars against chaos. Not because they are summoned, because chaos provokes them. In multiple recorded engagements, the Legion has appeared precisely at the moment when a demonic incursion reached critical mass, when a warp breach stabilized enough to permanently anchor itself in real space. The Legion arrives, and that anchor collapses. Not violently, not explosively. It simply fails. The warp seal snaps shut like a scar pulled tight, leaving demons stranded, weakened, or outright erased as their connection to the Immaterium is severed. These are not banishments. There are no howling returns to the warp. There is nothing. Oblivion. This has led some inquisitors to a conclusion so dangerous it is rarely written down, that the Legion's fire is not warp-born at all, but anti-warp, a psychic phenomenon inverted, a force shaped not by the Immaterium, but against it, a fire that burns concepts rather than matter, that consumes corruption, identity, and existence itself. If this is true, then the Legion's continued existence is not an accident of the warp. It is a violation of it, which begs a question. Who could create such a thing? There is only one name that fits. The Emperor of Mankind. During the Great Crusade, he mastered forces no one else could comprehend. He bound the warp without worship. He burned demons without faith. He shaped reality through will alone. If anyone could forge a weapon that burned against the Immaterium, it was him. And if such a weapon existed, one that required sacrifice rather than maintenance, then it would not be built from steel or circuitry. It would be built from souls. Loyal souls. Astartes souls. This would explain the Legion's composition. Why they fight with discipline, but without individuality. Why they do not speak. Why they show no fear, no hesitation, no self-preservation. They are not thinking about survival, because that question has already been answered. They have already died. What remains is obligation. Their appearance reflects this truth. Armor fused of form, ceramite cracked and immovable, flames that never consume the wearer, skulls that leer not as trophies, but as reminders. Their bodies are less vessels and anchors, holding something else in place. Duty. Their bolters burn with the same unnatural fire. Ammunition that should not exist ignites on impact, reducing targets to drifting ash and spectral residue. No blood. No remains suitable for ritual. No trophies for chaos to reclaim. This is annihilation without celebration. Against chaos champions, the Legion fights with terrifying focus. Sorcerers are prioritized immediately, often falling within seconds of contact. Warp lords and demon princes are surrounded, isolated, and burned until nothing remains but scorched ground and fading echoes. Even beings that should regenerate, reform, or return are denied that cycle. The Legion does not defeat chaos. It interrupts it, and that interruption is permanent. This has made them hated within the warp. There are demon litanies that speak of the burning dead, of the ones who do not scream, of the fire that eats names. Even the ruinous powers cannot agree on what the Legion truly is, only that it should not exist, which is perhaps the most telling sign of all. Chaos understands chaos. It does not understand the Legion. The Legion's behavior in battle reinforces this. They do not pursue fleeing enemies beyond necessity. They do not revel. They do not hunt for sport. Their actions are direct, surgical, inevitable. Once the objective, usually the collapse of a warp presence, is achieved, their aggression diminishes. They finish what remains and withdraw. Always withdraw. They do not stay to cleanse. They do not garrison. They do not rebuild. That is not their role. They're the firebreak, the moment when Inferno stops spreading. Imperial commanders who attempt to issue orders to the Legion are ignored. Vox channels return only static and heat distortion. Some officers report receiving a single sensation in response. Not a voice, not a thought, but a pressure, as if the Legion acknowledged the order and dismissed it as irrelevant. They answer to something else, something older, something that does not require communication. There are rare accounts, dangerous ones, where individuals claim to have heard words while standing near the Legion, not spoken aloud, not transmitted psychically, remembered, as if the thought had always been there. Hold, endure, burn. These accounts are dismissed officially as stress hallucinations. Unofficially, they are archived under sealed sigils. Because of the Legion of the Damned carries a fragment of the Emperor's will, burning, fragmented, unending. Then they are not merely warriors. They are scripture made violent, a commandment written in flame. And scripture does not argue. When the Legion fades, the warp remains wounded. Scars linger where breaches once stood. Psychers report long-term null zones where sorcery fails without explanation. Worlds touched by the Legion often become strangely resistant to further demonic incursions, as if something fundamental has been cauterized. This resistance does not feel holy. It feels empty, a space where corruption has nothing left to grasp. And so the Legion walks the warp not as its servant, but as its denial, fire against unreality, duty against entropy, the dead against the infinite. They are not salvation. They are containment. And containment always ends in silence. The fire dims, but it does not die. Chapter 4, bound by oaths that never ended. They do not fight for glory. They do not fight for honor. They fight because something, somewhere, still remembers the oath. Every space marine is forged around a promise, spoken before blade and bolter, sworn to the Emperor, to the Imperium, to brothers living and dead. Most oaths end when the warrior does. The Legion of the Damned is what happens when an oath refuses to die. Those who have studied the Legion's behavior closely, inquisitors, librarians, archivists who stare too long into forbidden fragments, have noticed something unsettling. The Legion does not respond to circumstance in the way living forces do. They do not adapt dynamically. They do not retreat from unfavorable engagements. They do not exploit victory beyond necessity. They execute, as if following pre-written commands etched into something deeper than memory. This has led to a grim hypothesis, that the Legion is bound not by hierarchy or leadership, but by oath logic, that each warrior within the Legion is tethered to a promise left incomplete at the moment of death, a duty failed through no fault of their own, a stand that should have held, but did not, worlds that fell too soon, defenses that broke, lines that collapsed under impossible pressure. The Legion appears where these failures echo. In this view, the Legion is not summoned by the Imperium, but by regret, by unresolved moments in history, where extinction nearly won. The warp, swollen with emotion and unfinished intention, becomes a medium through which these oaths reassert themselves, not as prayers, as obligations. This would explain the Legion's silence. Speech is unnecessary when purpose is absolute. Names are irrelevant when identity has been burned away. What remains is function, an oath made manifest, stripped of everything but intent. They do not acknowledge allies because allies are incidental. They do not mourn losses because losses already assumed. They do not celebrate victory because victory was never the goal. Completion is. Some among the ecclesiarchy claim the Legion are martyrs, saints of fire, preserved by the Emperor's grace. But saints are venerated. Saints are named. Saints inspire. The Legion does not inspire. It concludes. Their presence does not lift morale, so much as it settles it. Panic fades. Hope does not surge. but resolve hardens. Those who fight beside the Legion describe a sudden clarity, a brutal calm where fear becomes irrelevant. Survival stops mattering. Only holding the line does. This is not faith. It is alignment. The Legion reorients the battlefield around inevitability. There are rare, forbidden testimonies from survivors who claim to have recognized individual legionnaires. Not faces, those are skulls in flame, but posture, movement, the way a bolter is held, the way a warrior advances. A brother lost long ago, a chapter wiped from the rolls, a warrior who died holding a gate that should never have fallen. These recognitions are never confirmed. They cannot be, but they persist, and they always in the same way. The witness feels no joy, only sorrow sharpened into steel. Because if the Legion truly is composed of the oath dead, then each appearance is a reminder that the Imperium's failures are so vast that even the fallen must keep fighting. Their war gear reinforces this interpretation. Purity seals hang from their armor, burned but intact, their script illegible but unmistakably present. Chains remain wrapped around arms and bolters, fused into ceramite as if time itself attempted to tear them away and failed. These are not decorations. They are bindings. Every legionnaire is chained to something unseen, to a moment, a promise, a final stand that never finished. And the fire is not punishment. It is restraint, a containment field of faith, will, or something close enough that the distinction no longer matters. It keeps what remains of the warrior anchored, preventing dissolution into warp or release into death. The Legion burns because burning is the only state stable enough to hold them together. Extinguish the flame, and the Legion ends, which is why it never does. The Legion's relationship with the Emperor is never overt. They do not carry his iconography in recognizable form. No aquilas, no prayers etched cleanly into armor, and yet their actions align perfectly with the Imperium's most desperate needs, even when those needs contradict command orders or strategic logic. They arrive when the throne would choose survival over doctrine. This suggests a direct tether, not to the Imperium as it is, but to the Imperium as it was meant to endure, a version of duty older than bureaucracy, older than dogma, older than decay. The Emperor's will, stripped of mercy, not the Emperor who ruled, the Emperor who endured. This is why the Legion cannot be controlled, why no one commands them, why they do not stay to be thanked or cursed. You cannot order an oath. You can only fulfill it, and fulfillment has a cost. Those who attempt to follow the Legion when they withdraw always fail. They fade into flame, heat distortion swallowing their forms until nothing remains. Auspex returns nothing. Psychic tracking collapses. The Legion does not travel through space. They exit relevance. Their task complete, the Oath releases its grip, if only temporarily. But the galaxy is vast, and Imperium is failing everywhere at once. There are always more unfinished stands, more broken lines, more promises that end in blood instead of success. So the Legion returns. Again and again and again, not reborn, reactivated, until the last oath is finally fulfilled, and the last fire is allowed to die into silence. The embers tighten, drawing inward like a hell breath. Chapter 5. When they appear, the Legion does not come to wars. Wars come to the Legion. This distinction matters, because it reveals the pattern hidden beneath centuries of scattered sightings and censored reports. The Legion of the Damned is not present across the galaxy at random. They do not answer every cry for aid. They do not manifest at every doomed front. Nor do they appear simply because the odds are dire. They arrive only when something must not break. This is the key. Across 10,000 years of Imperial history, their appearances cluster around moments of structural collapse. Events where defeat would not merely cost lives, but unravel continuity itself. A sector-wide rout that would fracture supply lines beyond repair. A warp breach that would become permanent. A relic world whose fall would sever a lineage of faith or command that cannot be replaced. The Legion does not save people. It preserves outcomes. In the siege of Morden Prime, they emerged not when the outer defenses fell, but when the last Ashopathic choir was about to be annihilated, an event that would have plunged 3 subsectors into permanent isolation. In the defense of Cypher Mundi's outer bastions, they appeared only after the final fleet formation broke, buying exactly enough time for reinforcements to translate in system. They do not turn battles early. They intervene at the brink, when causality itself begins to tip. This has led some strategos to an unsettling realization. The Legion behaves less like a military force and more like a corrective mechanism, as if certain failures exceed an acceptable threshold, triggering their manifestation. The Imperium may be blind to this pattern, but the pattern exists. Their arrivals are almost always sudden, violent, and geographically precise. A single city, a single trench network, a single corridor leading to a vault, a gate, a relic, a command node. They do not spread thin. They concentrate. They seal. Witnesses report that time itself seems to distort when a Legion manifests. Vox logs desync. Chronometers lose seconds, then minutes. Some engagements record overlapping timestamps, as if the Legion's arrival folds moments together. This temporal disruption is never catastrophic, but it is always present. Reality adjusts around them, not because they bend it, because they replace something that was about to fail. The Legion often appears without warning even to allied psychers. Astropaths sense no incoming presence. Diviners see nothing until the fire is already burning. This suggests the Legion does not travel through the warp in the conventional sense. They do not translate. They emerge, as if stepping sideways into the moment they are required. This would explain why no one has ever tracked their approach, only their departure. The Legion's movement is not linear. They do not go from war to war. They move from necessity to necessity. This also explains why they never arrive too late. They arrive at the last possible instant, where intervention still matters. Never earlier, never later. And when they do, the battlefield changes. Enemy advances stall, not because of sudden tactical genius, but because pressure shifts. Assaults lose momentum. Morale fractures. Command cohesion collapses. The Legion's presence does not inspire panic in the way Night Lords do. It inspires something colder. Certainty. The enemy understands, instinctively, that the moment has closed. That whatever victory was possible has already slipped behind them. This effect is strongest among chaos forces. Cultists falter immediately. Demons hesitate, recoil, or overcommit in suicidal charges. Sorcerers lose focus, rituals unraveling mid-incantation, as if something has severed their anchor. The Legion does not counter chaos with belief. It counters it with finality. Even Xenos react strangely. Orcs, creatures of momentum and violence, often attack the Legion with reckless abandon, only to falter when the fire does not answer them as expected. Eldar reports speak of burning dead things that do not echo in Skane. Necron sensors struggle to classify them at all, registering the Legion as neither living nor mechanical, neither warp entity nor matter. The Legion exists between definitions. Imperial commanders who survive battles alongside them report a singular tactical phenomenon. Once the Legion commits to an engagement zone, that zone will not fall. Lines bend elsewhere. Flanks collapse. Entire formations are lost. But the point the Legion holds remains intact until their objective is fulfilled. This has led to a grim saying among veteran officers: if the Legion is with you, you will live. If the Legion is ahead of you, the war will end. Not in victory, in closure, And when that closure arrives, the Legion withdraws with the same precision as their arrival. No pursuit, no consolidation, no securing of ground beyond what was required. They vanish mid-battle if necessary, their flames dimming as suddenly as they ignited. This withdrawal often leaves Allied forces disoriented. Defensive lines suddenly feel fragile again. Confidence drains. The absence is as heavy as the presence was absolute, because everyone understands what it means. The Legion's task is complete. Whatever had to endure has endured. Whatever could be allowed to die will. Imperial records struggle with this. Victory tallies do not align. Casualty reports spike immediately after the Legion's departure, as if reality resumes its collapse once the corrective pressure is gone. Entire regiments have perished, holding ground the Legion deemed expendable, while a single vault, shrine, or transmission relay survives unscathed. The Legion does not care who pays the cost, only that the outcome stands. This is why the Legion terrifies Imperial authorities more than they admit. A force that intervenes selectively, according to criteria no one controls, cannot be trusted, and yet it cannot be refused, because when the Legion appears, it is already too late for debate. They are not there to ask permission. They are there because the galaxy has reached a point where only ghosts will suffice, and ghosts do not negotiate. They burn, they hold, they vanish, and the war continues, reduced, altered, scarred, but still possible. That is when the embers loosen. That is when silence returns. And that is when those who witnessed the Legion realize the truth too late. They were not saved. They were allowed to continue. Smoke hardens into shadow as the fire withdraws. Chapter 6, What They Leave Behind. The Legion of the Damned does not depart cleanly. They leave absence, and absence is weight. When the flames recede and the last legionnaire fades from sight, the battlefield does not return to normal. It never does. Something fundamental has been altered, not blessed, not healed, but cauterized. The air feels thinner. Sound carries oddly. Psychers describe the sensation as standing near a sealed wound in reality, where something once tore through and was burned shut with brutal finality. Victory, if it can be called that, feels wrong. Those who survive find themselves surrounded by destruction that does not fully make sense. Enemy corpses reduced to ash without scorch patterns. Craters that register extreme thermal readings but show no blast signatures. Equipment fused together by heat that should have melted the ground beneath it, but did not. Reality bears the marks of fire that did not obey physics. Imperial medici report a strange consistency among survivors. Fewer physical wounds than expected, fewer signs of panic, and yet long-term psychological damage is nearly universal. Nightmares plague veterans of Legion engagements, not of violence, but of stillness, endless corridors of flame, silent warriors watching without judgment, a sense of being measured and found sufficient or not. Some soldiers wake screaming not because they saw the Legion fight, but because the Legion noticed them. There are records, sealed, disputed, but persistent, of individuals who survived impossible odds while fighting near the Legion, only to die days later from unexplained systemic failure. No toxins, no warp taint, no injury sufficient to explain the collapse. As if whatever force sustained them during the battle simply let go. Others experience the opposite. Guardsmen who should have broken instead become unshakable. Fear responses dampen permanently. Pain registers late, distantly. These individuals often make exemplary soldiers afterward, but they are changed, detached, cold, unresponsive to inspiration or despair alike. Contact with the Legion strips something away. Not courage, illusion. Chaplains struggle most of all. Many report that their prayers feel unanswered in the Legion's aftermath. Not denied, simply irrelevant. Faith still exists, but it feels quieter, less performative, as though something truer has passed through and left ceremony behind. Some chaplains secretly fear this, because the Legion does not preach the Emperor. It enforces him. Inquisition cleanup teams frequently arrive after Legion sightings, not to investigate enemies, but to investigate reality itself. Auspex sweeps, psychona surveys, genealogical cross-checks on survivors, anything that might explain what happened. They find nothing conclusive. They never do. What they do find are patterns. Regions touched by the Legion show reduced warp activity for years afterward. Demonic incursions become rarer. Cult recruitment falters. Astropathic clarity improves slightly, but unpredictably. It is not a blessing. It is a scar, and scars can reopen. Imperial tacticians have attempted, foolishly, to predict Legion appearances. They chart data, cross-reference disasters, model thresholds of failure. They fail every time, because the Legion does not respond to numbers. It responds to meaning. A world with no strategic value might be saved while a forge moon of immense importance burns. A single shrine might endure while entire continents die screaming around it. This drives administrative analysts to madness. The Legion does not think like the Imperium. It thinks like history, and history only preserves what must echo forward. Everything else is noise. There are cases where Imperial forces attempted to follow the Legion after battle, desperate to learn where they go. Recon units advance into still-burning corridors. Vox units screaming static as heat shimmered like a mirage. None returned. Not bodies, not signals, not wreckage. The Legion does not retreat into space. It steps out of context, which raises the most terrifying implication of all. If the Legion can leave reality, then it is not bound to it. It is only visiting. Some radical inquisitors have proposed exterminators on worlds repeatedly touched by the Legion, arguing that whatever mechanism draws them may be a deeper structural flaw, an infection in causality itself. These proposals are quietly buried, because the Legion appears most often where exterminators would have come too late. They arrive where destruction would have erased something irreplaceable, and when they leave the Imperium still standing, damaged, weakened, but intact. That is their crime. They prove the Imperium can survive without understanding, that something older than bureaucracy still intervenes, and that terrifies those who believe control is the same as order. For the soldiers who survive, the memory never fades. They do not boast. They do not recount heroic moments. They avoid the subject entirely, or speak of it in whispers, because deep down they know the truth. The Legion did not come for them. They were simply in the way when the fire arrived, and when it left, it took certainty with it, leaving only the quiet knowledge that if the Legion ever returns, it will not be to save, it will be to finish. And when that happens, there will be no survivors left to wonder what they left behind. Only silence. The silence deepens, heavy as cooling iron. Chapter 7, The Legion and the Damned. They are not called the Legion of the Damned by chance. The name did not come from the High Lords, nor from the Ecclesiarchy, nor from any sanctioned archive. It came from the survivors, from those who saw the fire walk and realized, too late, that what stood beside them was not salvation, but something already condemned. To fight alongside the Legion is to feel judged without accusation. They do not look at allies with contempt, nor with camaraderie. Their skull helms turn briefly as if assessing, measuring. Then they move on, as though the living are temporary terrain, useful, fragile, replaceable. This is why soldiers whisper that the Legion fights with the Imperium, but not for it. They fight for something older, something already lost. There are moments, rare and unrecorded, when a Legion has turned its weapons not on the obvious enemy, but on Imperial forces themselves. Not openly, not in defiance, but with terrible precision. A commissar executing retreating troops, struck down by warp fire. A rogue inquisitor attempting to harness demonic artifacts, burned to ash mid-ritual. A command bunker obliterated after issuing an order that would have sacrificed a relic world for political convenience. These incidents are sealed, denied, explained away, but they exist, and they reveal the truth no one wishes to speak aloud. The Legion recognizes damnation, and it is not limited to Xenos or heretics. Damnation to the Legion is not corruption alone, it is betrayal of purpose. The Legion does not uphold imperial law. It does not care for rank, writs, or seals of authority. It answers to something far simpler and far more merciless, whether things still serve the endurance of mankind. Those who do not burn. This places a Legion in a category no other imperial force occupies. The Adeptus Astartes fight traitors. The Inquisition hunts heresy. The Ecclesiarchy polices faith. The Legion judges outcomes. This is why Chaos hates them so completely. Not because they destroy demons, but because they deny narrative. Chaos thrives on corruption, on tragedy, on downfall twisted into meaning. The Legion strips meaning away. It does not tempt. It does not punish. It ends. There are demon lords who refuse to manifest if the Legion is present. Warp entities that retreat mid-incursion. Not from fear, but from recognition. The Legion represents a state chaos cannot exploit. Finality without despair. Even the damned, those lost to chaos, sense this. Traitor Astartes have been observed hesitating when the Legion appears, their fury faltering into something like doubt. Some scream names as they burn, names of brothers, of chapters long destroyed, as if the fire remembers what they once were. The most unsettling encounters occur when the Legion faces those who almost fell, worlds teetering on corruption, regiments flirting with heresy, commanders rationalizing unforgivable choices. In these moments, the Legion's behavior changes. They do not charge. They advance slowly, methodically, as if giving reality one last chance to decide what it will become. Those who turn back, who destroy the artifact, abandon the ritual, refuse the pact, often live, scarred, broken, but alive. Those who persist do not die screaming. They burn quietly, reduced to ash so complete that even confession is denied. This is why some inquisitors believe the Legion is not merely a weapon, but a boundary, a line drawn in fire between survival and damnation. Cross it, and no appeal will be heard. The Legion does not forgive, but it does recognize. And recognition, in the grim darkness of the far future, is more merciful than any absolution. There are legends, dangerous ones, of individuals who, after surviving the Legion's judgment, felt something lift, a pressure gone, a certainty replaced by emptiness. These people often abandon ambition, power, authority. They fade into obscurity, as if trying to escape notice, because they know the Legion noticed them once, and may do so again. The Ecclesiarchy hates this implication. A force that judges without scripture undermines the entire architecture of imperial faith. So the Legion is framed as cursed, as damned, as a warning. But the soldiers know better. The Legion is not damned. It is what comes after damnation has already been decided. It is the last fire, not the first. And when it burns, it does not ask who you worship, only what you have chosen to become. The fire dims, the silence grows, and the Legion moves on, leaving the living to decide whether they were spared or merely postponed. Stillness, not peace, not rest, the kind of silence that exists after screaming has exhausted itself, the kind that follows extinction when even memory hesitates to continue. Chapter 8, The War That Never Ended. Before fire, there was quiet. Before the Legion, there was a promise made in darkness, when the galaxy was young enough to still believe in endings. The void remembers this. It remembers because the war never truly stopped. What mortals call history is only a series of pauses, brief, gasping silences between waves of annihilation. The Legion of the Damned exists because one such pause was not permitted, because a war was declared finished when it was merely waiting. They are not remnants of a single disaster. They are echoes of many. The forgotten wars, the redacted crusades, the purges erased not for shame, but for necessity. Every age produces conflicts too absolute to record. Wars where victory required such total erasure that even the truth became a liability. Those wars did not end. They sank into the warp, into silence, into the places where unfinished things gather. The Legion rose from that accumulation, not as an army, as a consequence. They are the afterimage of loyalty stretched past death, the residue of duty ground so fine it no longer resembles belief. They are what remains when obedience outlives the body, when service continues without reward, recognition, or hope of release. The Imperium believes wars end. The Void knows better. It knows that every battlefield leaves something behind. A pressure, a scar, a demand. Most of these fade. Some are sealed by time. Others rot into corruption. But a few are too heavy to disappear, too necessary. Those become the Legion. This is why they do not age, why they do not replenish, why their numbers neither grow nor diminish in any meaningful way. They are fixed as a prophecy already fulfilled and still unfolding. The Legion does not remember victories because victory is irrelevant. They remember failure, not as guilt, but as alignment. The moment where the galaxy nearly broke, and did not. They exist to ensure that moment never arrives again. Not everywhere, only where it matters. This is a truth hidden beneath all sightings, all fire-soaked testimonies. The Legion of the Damned is not fighting a present war. They are still fighting the same war. The one that decided the Imperium must endure at any cost. That war has no name and no date and no final campaign. It is the war against collapse itself. When the Legion walks, time grows thin. Past and future fold inward. Odos bleed into new ground. Dead chapters cast shadows across living ones. This is why witnesses glimpse unfamiliar heraldry beneath the flames. Sigils of wars that officially never happened. Because the Legion carries unresolved history with them. History that refuses burial. They are not summoned by need alone. They are summoned by continuity. When the chain of survival risks snapping, the Legion tightens it with fire. This is why they do not speak. Speech implies choice. The Legion has none. They are bound to inevitability, the way stars are bound to gravity. They move because the outcome demands it. They burn because burning is the only state that allows them to remain. And when they kill, it is not wrath. It is correction. The Void approves of this. The warp recoils from it. Because the Legion does not feed chaos. They starve it. Chaos thrives on stories, on ambition, despair, hope twisted into ruin. The Legion denies narrative. Their fire consumes not just flesh, but meaning. No martyrdom, no corruption, no lesson, only absence. That is why demons fear them. Not because they hurt, but because they end. The Legion is the shape of a closed door, and the galaxy hates closed doors. In the long silence between stars, there are still battlefields burning without light, places where the Legion once stood and reality never quite healed. These are not holy sites. They are not cursed. They are quiet, and in that quiet, the truth settles like ash. The Legion of the Damned is not waiting to be released. They are waiting to be needed, again and again, until the last war finally reaches its true ending, until extinction no longer threatens anything worth preserving, until the Void itself grows still enough to forget. Only then will the fire be allowed to go out. Only then will the Legion rest, and only then will silence truly mean the end. The void does not blink. It waits. Chapter 9. The fire between heartbeats. There is a space between moments. Not time, not distance. A pause where causality inhales and has not yet decided to exhale. The Legion of the Damned lives there. They do not march from the past into the present. They do not advance toward the future. They emerge from the interval, that thin fracture where reality hesitates before choosing collapse or continuation. This is why their arrival feels wrong. Why witnesses struggle to remember the instant before the flames appeared. Why Vox logs skip. Why memories blur. Why even the dead seem uncertain how they died. The Legion does not enter the battle. They insert themselves between outcomes. The void understands this place. It is ancient, older than stars, older than the First War. It is the same stillness that exists before a supernova, before civilization's last decision, before extinction chooses its final shape. The Legion is bound to that stillness. They are not fast, they are not slow. They are on time. This is why no force ever ambushes them, why traps fail, why even the most intricate stratagems collapse the moment the Legion steps into flame. You cannot outmaneuver something that arrives at the moment maneuvering stops mattering. Against them, probability erodes. Bullets miss not because they are dodged, but because they were never meant to land. Blades strike true and pass through nothing, because the strike belongs to a future that has already been denied. This is not invulnerability. It is irrelevance. The Legion exists in the margin where cause has already surrendered to effect. This is why they do not bleed. Blood is a negotiation between wound and survival. The Legion has finished negotiating. Each Legionnaire is a fixed answer to a question the galaxy asked too late. Their forms are not sustained by flesh alone, but by a decision that cannot be undone. They burn because the fire is the pressure holding that decision in place. Release it, and the answer dissolves. This is also why they cannot remain. To linger would be to re-enter time. To re-enter time would be to decay. So they strike, and they leave. Always. Those who attempt to chronicle their movements fail, because chronicles require sequence. The Legion breaks sequence. They do not follow one battle with another. They recur, like a word carved too deep to erode. Some librarians have theorized, quietly, heretically, that the Legion is what happens when enough futures collapse into the same necessity. That countless branching timelines where the Imperium failed were burned away, leaving behind only the strand where survival continued. The Legion would then be the ash of all other endings. This would explain their weight, why their presence feels heavier than armies, why hope dims rather than rises, why victory feels complete and empty at the same time. They are not saving this Imperium. They are enforcing the only Imperium that remains, the one that did not end. Every Legionnaire carries that burden. Every step they take presses all the futures that died beneath it. This is why they advance without haste, why they do not falter, why even titanic enemies feel small before them. They are walking proof that extinction was considered and rejected, but rejection leaves scars. The Legion cannot rejoice because joy belongs to possibility. They cannot mourn because mourning implies something might have been different. For them, it could not. The fire they were is not punishment. It is containment. The galaxy burns endlessly, but the Legion's fire does not spread. It holds. It compresses. It keeps something far worse from leaking back in. The weight of all the endings that did not happen. This is why the void itself seems to hush when they appear. Why stars feel distant. Why sound thins. The universe recognizes a load-bearing truth and gives it room. When the Legion withdraws, the interval closes. Time resumes. Probability reasserts itself. Mortals breathe again and call it survival, but something has been sealed. another ending denied, another fracture cauterized, another silence layered atop countless others. The Legion does not grow weaker from this. They grow heavier. And one day, the Void knows the weight will be too much. Not for them, for reality. On that day, the Legion will not arrive between heartbeats. They will arrive after the last one, and there will be no silence left to protect. Only fire, and the end that was delayed too long to avoid. The Void tightens its grip. Even silence feels watched. Chapter 10. When the flames go out, there will come a moment when the Legion does not arrive. Not because the Imperium has won. Not because the war has ended, but because there is nothing left to hold. The Legion of the Damned exists on borrowed stillness. Each manifestation steals time from the inevitable. Each intervention delays a conclusion the galaxy has been approaching since the first star learned how to die. The Void knows this. It is always known. The Legion is not eternal. It only feels that way to those still trapped in sequence. In truth, they are finite, like a firewall burning itself away to stop the greater blaze. Every time they appear, something is consumed. Not fuel, margin. The space between survival and extinction narrows. This is why the Legion's numbers never swell. Why no new warriors join their ranks in any way that can be confirmed. Why even their most frequent sightings never show growth. Only repetition. They are not replenished. They are spent. Each Legionnaire is an unrepeatable answer to a singular crisis. Once that answer is given often enough, it begins to thin. Not visibly, not dramatically, but the Void feels it. The fire dims fractionally. Not now, not soon, but inevitably. There are hints of this already, buried deep in forbidden comparisons. Later sightings show longer silences between appearances, more precise interventions, less excess. The Legion does not linger, even for seconds longer than required. They are conserving something, not strength, time. This is why they do not speak of endings. Why no prophecy escapes their flames. Why even chaos cannot coax revelation from them. The Legion does not know how the war ends. They only know where it must not end yet, when the last acceptable outcome is exhausted. When the Imperium becomes something no longer worth preserving, the Legion's purpose will collapse inward. Not in failure, in completion, and completion in the Void looks like disappearance. The fire will not explode. IT will not fade gently. It will close, like a wound ceiling over bone. What remains then will not be peace. The Legion was never a path to peace. It was a restraint placed on annihilation, a hand held against the galaxy's throat to slow the pressure. When that hand withdraws, the pressure resumes. This is why the Legion is feared even by those it saves. Because somewhere instinctively, every survivor understands. They are buying time they cannot repay. And time, in the far future, always collects its debt. There are ancient Void seers, mad, isolated, burned hollow by too much foresight, who claim to have glimpsed the final absence. A galaxy without the Legion. Not because they were destroyed, but because they were finished. In those visions, the stars do not scream. They do not collapse all at once. They simply stop being protected. And extinction proceeds without resistance. No fire, no ghosts, no last correction. Just consequence. Until that moment, the Legion continues. Silent, burning, unthanked. They will appear again when the margin thins too far, when the balance tips too sharply toward oblivion. They will stand in fire. They will enforce continuity. They will vanish, again and again, until there is no longer a reason to return. When that final silence comes, it will not be broken. It will be complete. And the Void, ancient, patient, inevitable, will remember the Legion not as saviors, not as monsters, not as myths, but as the last thing that said not yet. Nothing moves, not even the idea of movement. Chapter 11, the silence after the last fire. This is what remains when prophecy has finished speaking. Not ruins, not ash, not victory. Silence. The kind that does not echo, because there is nothing left that expects an answer. The legion of the damned is not present here, not because they were defeated, not because they were erased, but because the condition that required them has expired. The void does not mourn this. The void does not celebrate. It simply accepts. The legion was never meant to survive the ending. It was meant to delay it, a brace against collapse, a pressure seal over a fracture that could not be healed, only held. Now the pressure has equalized. There is no margin left to burn. In this silence, the galaxy is honest at last. No interventions, no corrections, no hands on the scale. Every outcome proceeds without resistance. Every failure completes its arc. This is what the Legion prevented, not extinction itself, but uncontrolled extinction. They gave the galaxy shape long enough for meaning to persist, long enough for memory to matter, long enough for the Imperium to believe it was still choosing its fate, rather than merely fulfilling it. Now choice is thinned to nothing. The Legion's fire is no longer visible, because it is no longer necessary. The war that demanded ghosts has reached its conclusion, not in triumph, but in closure. The last oath has been fulfilled, not rewarded, fulfilled. The warriors of flame do not die here. They do not fall. They do not scream or fade into legend. They simply release. The binding loosens. The pressure lifts. The fire closes inward and becomes still. What remains is not souls. It is completion. Somewhere beyond time, beyond sequence, beyond even the warp's hunger, the Legion rests, not as individuals, not as a force, but as an answer that no longer needs to be spoken. History moves on without them, clumsier, slower, unprotected, and that is how it was always meant to be, because a galaxy that requires ghosts forever is already dead. The Legion of the Damned was never hope. It was mercy measured in fire, and mercy, like all finite things, ends. The silence that follows is not punishment. It is truth. No flames to hold the line, and O dead to rise, and O correction left to apply. Only consequence. And the void, ancient, endless, impartial, accepts the final state without judgment. The Legion does not vanish. They are remembered by nothing, and that is the only ending they would have accepted. When the stars dim, there is no fire to answer, only silence, complete, unbroken, eternal, stillness, not the pause before sound, the pause after meaning. Chapter 12, What the Void Keeps. This is where the record ends. Not because there is nothing more to say, but because language cannot survive what comes next. The Legion of the Damned does not return. There is no final battle, no last stand crowned and fired, no revelation carved into the stars. Those are stories for civilizations that still believe in witnesses. The end is quieter. The void does not mark the Legion's passing. It does not dim stars or shake reality in acknowledgement. It simply absorbs the absence, the way it has always absorbed everything that outlived its usefulness. The fire is gone, not extinguished, not defeated, resolved. What once burned now rests as pressure released, as tension finally allowed to collapse inward. The Legion was never meant to stand at the end of all things, only between them, and now there is no between left. The Imperium persists for a time after this. It always does. Momentum carries it forward, like a corpse drifting on residual heat. Wars still happen. Faith still screams. Heroes still rise, believing their defiance matters. But something is missing. No last correction arrives, and impossible reinforcement steps from flame. Anno's silence walks the battlefield to decide what must endure. Losses become permanent. Failures complete themselves. For the first time in 10,000 years, extinction is allowed to proceed without interruption. This is not Chaos's victory. Chaos stars without resistance. This is not the Imperium's fall. IT simply finishes becoming what it already was. The Legion of the Damned was the proof that survival could be forced, that history could be held together by burned hands and dead oaths. Without them, the galaxy is honest, and honesty is lethal. Somewhere in the deepest quiet beyond warp and time, the Legion exists no longer as warriors, nor as fire, nor as memory. They exist as weight removed, as a burden finally set down. They are not watching. They are not waiting. They are complete. The void keeps no monument for them. It does not need to. The Legion never belonged to remembrance. They belong to necessity, and necessity has passed. What remains now is consequence. Pure, uncorrected, final. No ghost will come. No fire will answer. No silence will intervene to say what should have ended. The galaxy continues, not because it is protected, but because it has not yet stopped. And when it finally does, there will be no witnesses left to name what was lost. Only the void, unmarked, unmoved, satisfied. When the stars go dark, nothing follows, not even memory.